you for joining us today. We will be presenting Cisco Security OT Style. Santos is joining me for this webinar. And so what we are going to try to highlight is some of the key areas within the OT market that Cisco is helping to secure through its class-leading security products, and also work through what solutions you can leverage within your own organization to bridge the gap between your IT and OT security offerings and decrease the risk of the more modern connectivity world is bringing.
Thank you very much for joining. Just wanted to run through some of the things that we see around security and also what Cisco can offer. So M.A.C Solutions is a Cisco partner, so we work with them within the IoT space, but then as we all know, that IoT space is changing rapidly. We're driving all new abilities and capabilities and things, and this is just really a summary of what we can do around that security side of things. So to kick off, just going to quickly cover off, sort of like the main challenge that I see when I speak to people within the IoT OT space. So if you look at industry digitalization, over the last few years, there's been massive expansion within that side of the business. And, one of the things it does do is it does increase the attack surface. I can just barely remember when I first started in the OT space. Pretty much, I would probably say 99% of all networks that I worked on were isolated. There was no internet connection. They were all just standalone silo networks that were doing a job, a function, and delivering products and processes and things like that. So security wasn't even a relevant discussion, because unless somebody physically walked into a plant and did something, there was no threat. But one of the problems is with those systems is that you can't then take anything out of them. You can't do any optimization. You can't increase capabilities. You can't, get the best from those networks. So, as we look at today and tomorrow, the industrial Internet of Things is allowing smart industry, smart grids, distributed devices, intelligent buildings, smart cities, but also analytics, data collection, all of these things, which is driving optimization, getting the best out of the network, pushing the industrial network into the foreground, because I think there's just been a slow shift to realizing the fact that industrial networks are some of the key powerhouses behind some of these major companies in the world. And while they may have an amazing standalone IT system that they run their company from, the actual IT systems that are running their core business is lacking behind. And this is where one of the things that, all of this new technology is being pushed for. But because of that, because it's still stuck in that past, they're not designed for cybersecurity. They were designed for a guy to walk around with a clipboard and maybe take some measurements and things. They weren't designed for, all the threats that are coming daily into the various spaces. So some of the key challenges within the securing the industrial networks, skill shortage, people who know what they're doing, because it's not only a fact of having the IT skills that you need, but it's also having the OT staff. I remember having several meetings in the past where we would go in, we would be setting up a new system. It may be the first one that actually is doing some integration between IT and the OT systems. And the head of manufacturing, who was running the plant floor network, had never ever spoken to the head of IT. And I'm sure that there's probably some people out there nodding along going, yeah, it may have been me, or it may have been, colleagues that I know, where there was a complete disconnect between the two sides. And then, but once you started having that conversation, and then it sort of snowballed, it was like, well, I'm doing this. Oh, I'm doing the same. We can collaborate and things, but it's driving that skills initiative. And one of the problems is that shortage of people who know their relevant solutions and being able to then migrate them across. We all know about the threats. I think every day, every other day, you can turn on the news nowadays and there's something maybe about a company coming under, being attacked, I mean, some of the really big ones in the recent past, which I can recall, sort of like Travelex and people like that, being held to cyber ransoms and things like this. But it's everywhere, every single day. I think the junk mail filters are catching hundreds of possible phishing attacks and things like this. So the threats out there are just growing exponentially, and it's really quite scary once you start actually digging into how much you're being attacked. A lot of the security that's in place both within the IT and the OT sort of side of things is shielding you from the sheer volume that your company may be receiving. Then, of course, there's that compliance factor. So, within recent years, there's been initiatives with things like GDPR and also the actual industries themselves wanting to then start to push the cyber rhetoric out to the people who are designing, implementing, and actually managing and monitoring those networks to say, hey, you're actually going to have to start thinking cyber. We know you're a critical industry. We know that if your industry gets a big spike in attacks, there could be some serious problems, not only just for local infrastructure, but also nationally, whether it be electricity, water, the actual main utilities, right the way through to large companies delivering critical services, whether it's internal public transport and things like that. They all need to be protected. No one is immune to a cyber attack. All the cyber guys are thinking, who is the new one that we can go after that may not have that security mentality, and who might be a soft spot. And of course, then the other thing as well is that agility. I think one of the key things that I would probably take away from the last few years is this growing trend of the speed of which everything's happening. Going back a bit, when I first joined, industrial was, I'd probably say about 5 or 6 years behind the main IT stream, and it would all just sort of, new innovations in IT, and you'd wait a few years, and they would just generally quickly trickle down, and then the industrial side would just pick and choose and say, oh, that's quite a nice little feature. We'll start adding that into the industrial side of things. Now that's been cut down to months, if not immediately, on launch. The actual features and benefits are being rolled out directly to both IT and OT. It's really that sort of quick. And I go on to it a bit later on about how, the speed of change is driving a lot of this. So one of the key things is that visibility. I think, one of the things that's been recognized over the last few years is that, unless you can actually see what's happening on your networks, you don't know what's going on your networks. It seems pretty obvious, but, there's been so many networks that I've been lucky enough to be involved in and work with where, if you ask any basic questions about the network, everyone would just pull a blank face and go, I don't know. There's some blinky lights and it all kind of works. What happens when it doesn't work? Oh, we just call Bob and he comes out and fixes it. What happens if something happens to Bob? That's not a great network, and that's running an entire business. Some quite critical businesses. So that key thing of visibility, being able to see the threat, see what's going on, see a change in the network. Most of the time, the only time people actually knew something had happened on their network was when everything stopped. It was either working or it wasn't. When it wasn't, then it was like, okay, let's try and work out what's happened. But now we're moving to this thing of, well, if we can actually actively, see what's going on, let's understand how all of this is working. We can see things happening and then get ahead of them. It's better to be preventative rather than reactive at the end of the day. And I mean, in some of this slide is quite typical of some conversations I've had. IT cares, cyber threats, you know, they're at the front end, they're dealing with that main internet connection, and they're very focused about it. You know, they've got the main IT network, they've got all the main office staff that are getting bombarded day in, day out with everything and the main domain, you know, so they are probably a bit more cyber aware. Then you've got the OT side of things, which is, you know, still a very critical part of the operation. If that's not there, then that reason for having the whole IT portion of the network goes away if your OT part stops. But, you know, they're generally more about keeping, you know, the production going, keeping the lights on, you know, doing what they do best. But then as they then start to connect it all together, this is when you get these advantages and disadvantages, is the way I would probably put it. So this is why now there is this big focus around collaboration between the IT and the OT. One cannot generally work without the other one to be able to deliver a true industrial network. So you need to have your IT network set up, secure, robust, and also you need to have it linking and driving into the OT side of things. Long gone, I think, are the days when it would just be, you know, oh, we want to connect our OT network, so let's just grab a patch cable and connect across between two switches at the closest point physically in the building. Now it's a case of, you know, the business wants to know what's happening on their plant floor. They want to know the analytics. They want to know the data. They want to know and be able to do things with that network the same way that they do with their IT networks. But of course, as you connect the two together, you create paths into the OT network, especially as you then start to look at the very interesting things of maybe remote access through for the actual workers, you know, being able to do remote working, especially at this time of the at this time in the global situation, where pretty much 99% of everyone's gone remote working where possible. If you can then extend to a point a lot of your plant floor, maybe manufacturing guys, to remote, but still be able to connect in and do the work they need, and just have a skeleton staff physically to, you know, push the buttons and physically do things. You know, that is a great thing. But then, of course, all of that remote connectivity is opening up pathways which need to be identified and secured. So one of the key things is the fact that generally Cisco is credited with having the full solution. So it truly is end to end, because if you think about it, they've got the IT network, I'm sure, in pretty much most OT plants or whatever. If you go to the IT network and then open up the doors to the server rooms and things, you generally find huge stacks of Cisco equipment running the actual full corporate networks. So, you know, they are the sort of trusted network guys when it comes to IT. A lot of the standard protocols that are used today across all industries were actually developed by Cisco and then taken on by the world standards organizations. You know, their innovations sort of lead the way. But then you've also got the network connectivity, you've got management, data control and exchange, edge compute. But the one thing that Cisco has done is they have then underlined all of it with cybersecurity, whether it's the IT side, the OT side, you know, all of their things, data centers, you know, you name it, they're coming up with solutions that sit right across the board. So it doesn't matter where in your network you are, you have that same protection, whether you're at the front end IT or you're on the back end OT. So to sort of drill down a bit more into that sort of OT side of things, there's no compromise. You know, you've got everything from securing management, zero touch provisioning, role-based access control, policy automation. You know, you've got all of the sort of high-end IT solutions. You've then got the actual securing of network communications, whether you're looking at firewalls, VPNs, hardware encryption, traffic filtering, and then you've actually got down to physical devices, whether it's input alarms for digital sensors, and also secure boot, digital code signage. So one of the things that Cisco works very heavily on is making sure that their software is as suitable and as good as it can be. Because there's not really a slide for this, but I think nowadays, if you look at how fast things move, it seems like every other day there is a new software platform, there's a new software solution, there's a new software something, whether it's on mobile phones or on PCs or whatever, that is looking to change, revolutionize, is becoming the new market leader. And one of the things that Cisco's realized is the fact that to be able to keep up with all of this new software, you have to have essentially that speed of software yourself. Hardware can't keep up. We can't keep swapping out hardware endlessly with a new software feature on it or a new software capability, because otherwise you'd be literally swapping your hardware every 3 months. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but if I was to look at swapping hardware every 3 months, I wouldn't do it, because I'd be like, well, that's just going to be crippling. The costs alone are going to be phenomenal. So Cisco identified this early on, and what they've done is they've been pushing through with the whole product architecture design, this separation between the hardware and the software. You have hardware that is capable of running all this amazing software, but then you allow the software to be able to be changed and keep up with all of the demands. So one of them is, if you look at some of the stuff that Cisco's done around DNA Center, especially for the IoT space. So Cisco call it intent-based networking. So if you look at previous years, if you said building maintenance systems and things like that, you would have an IT team managing the general IT infrastructure. You then have an OT team managing all of the main building systems, which may have just been the HVAC systems and maybe some other stuff now. But now, if you look at where everything's going within the IoT space, what you're getting is then there is so much technology going into buildings. Before, I can just about remember the only switches you had in some buildings were literally the light switches. Now, I don't think there's any building, any office building in the world really, that does not have routers, Ethernet switches. They've got various sensors, it's the fire alarm systems, you name it. But then it's all being tied together. And all of that needs to be managed. You need to have the data, because while each individual system may work, there is that understanding of, if you can see that full visibility and actually manage the building as a whole rather than individual chunks of it, you can actually get the best out of the building. You can make huge cost savings, whether it be from lighting, security, data access, all these things, and also increase security. So you can automated elevators that know whether they should be going to certain floors and all this sort of stuff. It's amazing what we can do, and that is being driven by this power of that full interconnection. So I touched on it a bit earlier, but this is one of the things that Cisco has been really working on, is the IOX. So especially for the industrial side of things, you have computing at the network edge. So I think everyone nowadays is familiar with cloud computing, and then one of the terms that I don't know whether it's officially Cisco coined it, but it's fog computing. So you take the clouds and you lower them down. You're not quite on the ground, and they're calling it fog compute. So you're taking some of that need for sending data all over the place, which takes time, takes money, takes effort. In other words, various connections, whether you're doing long backhauls or satellite links or whatever it is that you'd be looking at. So one of the things that with that power of software Cisco has done is they've been able to do it so that on its actual hardware devices, with that split between the hardware and the software, they're able to actually do this edge compute system. So what that means is that instead of having to send everything up into a cloud, have it crunch some numbers and then send back down and say, hey, okay, I need you to now do an action, maybe turn a valve, whatever. You can actually start programming and actually getting your network to help you out. So I think one of the biggest examples, biggest and best examples of this is maybe you've got pressure valves and things. Maybe it's a oil rig or it's some sort of drilling operation. Previously, you'd have to have a guy either walk around with a clipboard and look at the pressure gauges, and if they start getting really high, you'd have to turn them down. Or as the technology improved, it would be sent off up into the cloud. Eventually, there'd be an algorithm run to say, oh, actually, pressure's increased by 15%. Might want to have somebody have a look at it. With the fog and the actual network intelligence that we've got nowadays, what you can actually do is you can actually tell the devices at the end and say, hey, if you see a sudden 20% spike in pressure over a 10-second period, shut the valve off and then send all the data up to the cloud. But you've protected your asset. Instead of waiting for it to go critical and then you've got a big problem on your hands, it can take that decision and protect people, assets, everything that you would normally have done, but it's happened at a much faster pace because a lot of that simpler decision making is being able to be run at the edge. It's only being able to run at that edge because you've got the hardware and the software intelligence to be able to then run those applications. And that's where one of the things that Cisco excels at. You've got the manageability and also being able to scale it out as well. I think we've all probably can all agree on the fact that if anyone can scale, it's Cisco. I mean, you look at some of the world's largest networks, they will be full Cisco and Cisco networks, whether it's IT, industrial, or whatever. So one of the key things that has happened over the last probably year and a half was Cisco have been investing heavily within the world of industrial cyber. And one of those things that they've been really working on is what they call cyber vision. So this is an asset inventory and security platform for the industrial IoT. This is adding more strings to the bow, essentially. So, while you have that core security piece, Cisco is always looking whether through collaboration, acquisition, or just generally building its own security platforms out, ways to seal off and close the loops that mean that there is full network visibility and security. So one of the things that cyber vision does is it gives that visibility. We kind of mentioned it earlier. If you don't know what your network is doing, how do you know what it's doing? It seems quite obvious, but yeah, lots of people out there have networks, and if you start trying to query them about what would your perfect day network look like, they wouldn't be able to tell you. And in this modern world, being able to understand what your network should look like is key, because if you know what it should look like, you can then spot when it's not looking as it should be. You've then got operational insights. Generally, standard IT networks, the more basic ones, they get configured. The original thing was on a network, you would rock up to site with your hardware, you install all your hardware, you do your configuration, you get it all up and working as the customer asks, and then you walk away, and then those configurations never change. They're normally maybe uploaded, saved in a secure file just in case something happens. The switch needs to get swapped out, and that was it for 8, 10 plus years, however many years it was. With the way that networking is changing the whole face of everything, configurations are being changed and altered almost daily in some cases, and you need a way of being able to identify those changes, because yes, there is the case that some people will have contractors and other people, but there is good change. I think we've all been there. There's been good changes on networks, and there's unfortunately been bad changes on networks. Somebody's come along and said, I know what I'm doing, I've had a great idea, and the next thing you know, all the alarm bells are going off, and it's like, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Being able to identify all the configuration changes, who did what, so that then you can keep those records. Why was it that the IP addresses changed? Why was it that you changed and added extra VLANs, or changed security policies and things like that? It's coming back to this key where if the network goes down, it's so critical, there has to be an accountability trail to say, okay, Bob, why was it you reset 5 of the switches? He may turn around and say they were showing this, that, and the other, and it's an absolute genuine reason. And it was like, yeah, it was the right thing to do, and it's just we just wanted to double check. But you have that option now. And then of course there's the other key one, which is then that threat detection. I think a lot of people don't realize, outside of the OT space, that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes by the bad guys, just deliberately trying to attack the OT network. They know that unfortunately there is, in some cases, very old equipment out there, and they know that that old equipment, when it was designed and built, wasn't built with cyber in mind. I can think of several just off the top of my head where I know that the equipment that they're running was maybe first installed over 10 years ago. If you think back to over 10 years ago, the cyber threat landscape was, well, that's something in films, isn't it? That's Mission Impossible and all these sorts of things. And it's like, now it's now, but that hardware and the software that's running on it is from 10 years ago. And these guys know it. So this is why they're trying to take advantage of this. So this is one of the things that Cisco is really pushing for, is this not only unification of the IT/OT network, but then also being able to pull together and update and get the networks where they need to be. They need to be on a secure footing. And unfortunately, maybe 10, 15 plus year old hardware isn't able to support those threats. Yes, okay, it could be very critical bits of kit. So then what you need to do is then place in front of it the protection. And that is something that you can do with the Cisco network. You can then sort of pad around. If you have a very old core network, you can then pad round and help secure it, to make sure that give it a barrier to stop people from coming at it. And that's one of the things that you can do with the Cisco solution. So for any who may be a little bit familiar with Cisco, they've over the last few years been increasing and really rolling out a lot of security solutions for the IT industry, really pushing for full network visibility, control, and manageability. So one of the things that they've been doing, especially within the OT side, is they have been pulling that in. You see a lot of companies and they'll be like, this is our IT offering, this is our OT offering, and we might throw something in the middle that helps them work together. Well, what Cisco have done is they've gone, well, there's no point doing that. If you're going to have an IT solution, it has to be for an OT market as well. to be able to then fully unify the two together. And that's what they've been working on. So on this slide, I know it's a little bit busy, but you've got all of the security, all of the sort of software offering. And if you remember the fact that the software is the thing that can keep up to date with all the threats and what the world is throwing at it on a daily basis, underpinned with the hardware platform. But what you have here is you have Cisco Dna Center. So that's a full network management solution for all of your IT infrastructure. That's been rolling out for the last few years. But what Cisco have done is they've made sure the fact that all of the OT equipment is also fully integrated into that. So they've been, that's their core sort of driver on the IT side of things. They've made sure the fact that all of the OT stuff, all of the industrial stuff also sits within it as well. You've got their overriding software security platforms, Cisco Firepower, traffic filtering, Cisco ICE, identity services engines. This is your access control systems. That is also all filtering into not only your Cisco industrial network, but then your DNA center and everything. And then you've got StealthWatch, which is network flow analytics. They've literally been tying in all of their key systems to be able to, link and give one secure, cohesive solution. And then, of course, one of the things that they've done now with cyber is they've added that as well. So, it is truly, whether you have an IT network or an OT network, you just have a Cisco network. It doesn't matter the fact that it's IT OT. You've got the same secure resilience, you've got the same support, you've got everything built into it, whether it is that industrial side or that core IT side. So a quick thing about the cyber so two-tier edge architecture that integrates with existing security solutions. So what they've done is it's separate hardware box with then sensors on the network that then take in the data, and then it's essentially just a ginormous analytics compute engine. Not a massive expert on it, but on how it fundamentally works on a very deep level. But you have this ability to very easily see exactly what's happening on your network. And as we mentioned before, visibility is absolutely key. If you need to be able to see to understand your network. Once you can understand your network, you can then understand what is happening to your network, whether it be good things, bad things, threats, whatever. You can then understand and then take appropriate action. But then feeding into cyber vision is then all of the core sort of switch routing solutions. So you've got industrial switching, gateways, compute, routing, Wi-Fi, because we know now that it's no longer just straight switches, it's all of these solutions are being deployed in various networks. And it's got that integration, but then it also has partner integration. So one of the things that a lot of people think about is if you look at cyber, there is a mentality of, you don't want to stick with one solution, because if they might have a vulnerability, then my whole system has that. Well, that's not exactly true anymore, but it's still a widely held belief within some of the security portfolio. But one of the things that Cisco has done is it is doing full integration with existing security offerings. So whether it's access control, which, as you can imagine, because it is literally a fundamental of the network, has to be Cisco. But your firewalls, you can have Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, all of the key players, it can all integrate into those. You've then got the CMDBs, you've got the ServiceNow, BMC Ready, and then you've got the CM, which is then, all of these various things can all then be pulled in together and drives that integration into your security application. So we're not just talking about your IT network, your OT network. We're just talking about, driving, creating one cohesive, secure network. Once you have the trust in the network to be able to then essentially define your network as one network, how much easier is it then to allow access, get data, pull analytics, be able to make those key marketing, those key, business strategy decisions. I think one of the things that's highlighted from the last year or so is the fact that, the best laid plans of companies just disappeared overnight. They were literally having to redo strategies that they had probably had in place for years, and overnight they're having to come up with completely new business strategies, business goals, business outcomes, and they're having to change the way they do business just to be able to keep trading, essentially. See it on the news all the time. So having a solid network platform that spans your entire business, which you can then leverage, easily make changes, adapt to whatever it is you need to do next, that is where the Cisco systems really sort of sit in, is the fact that, if next week you need to then do something different on your network, instead of having to go around 100 different separate network devices to be able to make a change and make your network do something, you can go to a single dashboard, type in the single command, and the system will then go out and then literally do all of that for you. So you can make changes on a daily basis to your entire network and see what works, see what doesn't work, manage it and do all of that sort of stuff. That's the power of this software vision that within Cisco. So some of the software platforms I kind of mentioned earlier. So Cisco ICE, Identity Services Engine. So this is, in a nutshell, identifying all of the devices on your network. If you can identify and know all of the devices on your network, you can build that trust, you can build that picture of what is on your network. I think I've definitely, over the course of my career, met a lot of people, and it's like, right, so how many switches do you have? I think it might be about 50. Might be about 50. Surely you have a record? No. Well, we can send Bob and he can wander around and count them, but you might miss a couple. But but the ones that he doesn't count, well, they're a security threat. They don't get updated. They don't get replaced. That's a big security risk. Identity Services Engine rolled out across the platforms, even across the industrial network range. It makes sure the fact that all of your devices on your network are who they say they are, and they are, running as they should be. Stealth Watch. So this is that next generation thing. So what this is doing is this is actually looking at the flow of data. Is it the right way? Is it, is there anything unexpected going on with it? Is the data, as it should be? And it can raise alarms. It can do that sort of like initial spotting of, bad data connections and things. Firepower integration, of course, Cisco Firepower, firewalls, rules, remediation, getting all of that. So once you've identified something, you need to then be able to take actions on it to make sure the fact that it's then stopped or allowed through, or whatever it is you decide to do. Firepower, integrating that then gives that string to that bow. Correlation policy, identify anomalous flows within things, kill sessions that aren't needed, those sorts of things. Then what you have is that integration I was saying about. So you've got your system, your CyberVision system, but you've got maybe IBM QRadar integration or something like that. Yep, not a problem. you can push data out to your other systems. So it's not a case of, you know, rip and replace. What you can do is you can just add to it and then feed into your other systems as well. So, you know, the more visibility you have, it's not about, you know, just, you know, pushing with a single in a single direction. You know, if you need to spread the data so that you can have different departments doing different things, looking out for different objectives and stuff, easy, no problem. You can push all your syslogs out to separate systems, which can then manage, monitor, collate, do analytics and all this sort of stuff. Then you've got things like Splunk, events management. That can also then be pushed out into separate recording systems and things like this. So I guess the general thing I'd like just for you to take away is the fact that, you know, there is pretty much all of this is being able to drive a network cohesion. It's not just about, you know, sticking with a solution and trying to, you know, just narrow it down. But what it is it's just being able to increase all of that general visibility across the network. Once you know and can identify all of the things on your network, especially if in the industrial space, I've been lucky enough in the past to go and various sites and things, and the amount of times that you then, you know, oh, what's in that box over there? Don't know, open it up. Oh, look, there's a whole bunch of switches and maybe a router. Oh, I didn't know that was there. Aren't you the head of networks? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. So, you know, you know, we can't have those vulnerabilities in the network anymore. We need to have a full cohesion, know exactly everything on the network, and be able to, you know, secure it across the IT/OT divide. And the last side, the really big plug, at the moment, Cisco provides this absolute end-to-end solution, both through IT and OT. You know, we're in discussion from M.A.C solution side with several companies around, you know, helping them support their transition and what they're doing within their networking side of things. But it is that visibility. So I know that, you know, there's the cliches of single pane of glass and all this sort of stuff, but, you know, forget all that. It is being able to know what's on your network, you know, and what it's doing. Also, to be able to scale, secure, uptime. You know, we're all under that pressure of uptime, no matter how big or small your network is. Nowadays, if your network's not working, your business isn't working. It's taken a while, and I think, you know, especially once you get to maybe some very senior levels, they're not maybe grasping it. They're slowly grasping it, I hope so. But, you know, it used to be that, you know, if your network went down, you carried on. You could carry on working, and then they bring the network up, and it was just a bit easier to do it via your computer and networks and all the rest of it. But now, if the network goes down, the company goes down. So why would you not insist on having the best solution, the most resilient, the solution that gives you the most return and the ability to drive any change that you may need, no matter how small or large, right the way across your business? Because that is what the networks have to deliver on a day-to-day basis now. And then, of course, then, you know, the last thing is then outperforming on competition fronts. So Cisco, world leader, you know, mentioned it earlier, if you open up most, you know, IT suites, you know, you'll just probably find huge racks of Cisco in there. If it's good enough to run your entire business IT infrastructure, surely it's got to be good enough with what they're doing. It's more than good enough to run all of your core OT edge side, and you then get the full benefit of that full integration as well. So that was my quick presentation. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you have a great day, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. Cheers. Thank you very much.